side. I also wanted to mention, I know that Mr. Sherman also mentioned earlier this evening, and another of my colleague from California, Bob Filner, has basically spearheaded this effort. There has been a group of Kurdish Americans who have been fasting on the steps of the Capitol, on the main steps of the Capitol now for a number of days, probably more than a few weeks, because in order to highlight, if you will, the ongoing tragedy in the mountains of Kurdistan, where again the Turkish government, which has of course denied the Armenian genocide and continues to, is also basically trying to essentially obliterate, not only individually by killing Kurds in Turkey, but also by denying Kurds the ability to speak their language, to learn about their culture, to go to school in Kurdish. And this fast, conducted by supporters of the Turkish people on the Capitol, includes the human rights activist Catherine Porter, who is the spouse of one of our colleagues, the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. John Porter. And I just wanted to say that these fasters deserve tremendous credit for their dedication, courage, and perseverance. It's been getting cold lately here in Washington, but that has not deterred them. Last Friday, I joined with a group of my colleagues, members from both sides of the aisle, to visit with the fasters and their supporters. I know that Congressman Sherman and Congressman Filner were out there with me. And every day as we pass by these people sacrificing for the causes of peace and human rights, the sight of these protesters on the Capitol steps is a reminder to all people of conscience of the plight of the Kurds and the governments that hold them down, most notably the government of the Republic of Turkey. In particular, Mr. Speaker, as we come into the Capitol to cast votes on legislation sent here to do a job by the constituents who elected us, I hope we will remember one of our fellow elected legislators who does not have the opportunity to represent her constituents, and that's Mrs. Leyla Zana, one of the most prominent victims of Turkey's cruel, irrational, anti-Kurd policies. Leyla Zana was elected to a seat in the Turkish parliament in 1991, representing her hometown. She was elected with 80% of the total vote, and she became the first Kurd to break the ban on the Kurdish language in the Turkish parliament, for which she was later tried and convicted. She had uttered the following words, and I quote, "I am taking this constitutional oath for the brotherhood of the Turkish and Kurdish peoples." On May 17, 1993, she and one of her colleagues addressed the Helsinki Commission of the U.S. Congress. The testimony was used against her in a court of law. And on March 2, 1994, her constitutional immunity as a member of Parliament was revoked, and she was arrested, taken into custody, tried in a one-sided mockery of justice, convicted, and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Leyla Zana, who is 35 years old and the mother of 2 children, is well into the 3rd year of her 15-year sentence at a prison in Ankara, the Turkish capital. And Ms. Zana's pursuit of democratic change by nonviolent means was honored by the European Parliament, which unanimously awarded her the 1995 Sakharov Peace Prize. She has received major consideration for the Nobel Peace Prize, and more than 150 members of this House, my colleagues, have written to President Clinton on her behalf, and I hope a majority of the members of this House will join with the European Parliament in defending the human and civil rights of this brave woman. And I might remind my colleagues, a fellow parliamentarian, a fellow elected official. We owe her our moral support and to urge our ambassador in Ankara to raise Mrs. Zana's case with the Turkish authorities at the highest levels. Mr. Speaker, I just want to share with the members of this body and anyone watching us some of the basic goals of Mrs. Zana, of the fasters outside this building, and of the repressed Turkish people of Turkey, of the Kurdish people of Turkey. The Kurdish identity must be recognized. The use of the Kurdish language in conversation and in writing should be legalized. All cultural rights should be conceded. Kurdish political parties must be given full constitutional rights, and a general amnesty for all political prisoners must be granted. Mr. Speaker, we often hear from our own administration and from other apologists for Turkey about what a great democracy the Republic of Turkey is. Yet this is how a duly elected representative of that so-called democracy is being treated for the crime of speaking her language and defending the rights of her people. Mr. Speaker, this cannot go on. For many years, we've witnessed a clear pro-Turkish tilt on the part of the State Department. We often hear about the strategic importance of Turkey and its pivotal location. And I don't discount those arguments completely, but we have to balance those factors against some other very important considerations. Turkey continues to spend billions of dollars in obtaining sophisticated weapons systems, not only from the United States, but from France, Russia, and elsewhere. Much of this military hardware is then used to repress and terrorize the Kurdish people, citizens of Turkey who should be extended the protection of their country's armed forces and not be victimized by those armed forces. Meanwhile, Turkey does not have a strong industrial base and is lacking in infrastructure in many key areas. So why is Turkey, our ally, throwing so much of its limited resources on sophisticated weapons to use against its Kurdish residents when it could be investing in better schools, healthcare, and other services that could help put Turkey on a par with the Western nations it seeks to be associated with? About half of the worldwide Kurdish community lives within the borders of the Republic of Turkey, where their treatment is an absolute affront to basic fundamentals of human rights. And at least 1/4 of the population of Turkey is Kurdish. Yet in Turkey, the Kurds are subjected to a policy of forced assimilation, which is essentially written into the Turkish constitution. To date, 3,134 Kurdish villages have been destroyed, and more than 3 million of their residents have been forced to become refugees either in Kurdistan or abroad. I would venture to say, Mr. Speaker, that in many ways what we're seeing happen in Kurdistan today is in some ways the prelude to the same type of genocide that occurred by the Turks against the Armenian people 80-some years ago. While the situation for the Kurdish people in such nations as Iraq, Iran, and Syria is also deplorable, I wish to draw particular attention to the situation in Turkey for some basic reasons. Turkey is, after all, a military ally of the United States, a member of NATO. As such, it has received billions of dollars in military and economic assistance, courtesy of the American taxpayers. In addition, Turkey aspires to participate in other major Western organizations and institutions, such as the European Union. Mr. Speaker, I believe that most Americans would be frankly appalled to know that a country that has received so much in the way of American largesse is guilty of so many breaches of international law and simple human decency. I've joined with many of my colleagues in denouncing Turkey's illegal blockade of Armenia, its failure to acknowledge responsibility for the Armenian genocide of 1915 through 1923, its ongoing illegal occupation of Cyprus, and its threatening military maneuvers in the Aegean Sea. The brutal treatment of the more than 15 million Kurds living within Turkish borders offers a major argument for cutting back on military and economic aid to Turkey, or to at least attach very stringent conditions to provisions of this aid. If Turkey wants the benefits of inclusions in Western institutions that are supposed to be founded on the defense of democracy and human rights, then that country should start living up to the agreements it has signed. Again, the situation in Kurdistan is just another example of the type of treatment that Turkey has done historically with the Armenian people and other peoples, and it must stop.